Okay, so one, let me just pause, and this is something that came up in our breakout room earlier. The Megabytes team, we know that you all oftentimes only look at this GIS stuff twice a year, once over the summer and once in February. And it's like a foreign language. If you don't use it, you lose it, and you forget how all these different parts and pieces work. So this is a blanket offer to all of you that if there is some sort of map or visualization that you want some help putting together and you don't know exactly how to do it, just drop me an email. I won't make it for you, but I will definitely set up one of these virtual meetings with you and walk you through the process and help you along the way. We want you to be successful with this. And we don't want the GIS side of this thing to be the what's holding you back from, with you and your students exploring. So please just let us know so we can help. So what I thought I would start with actually is, and I'm not sure we actually talked about this last year, was very, very briefly, I'm just going to kind of show you the process of how we got the data from the OVA traps and the data from the survey 123s that you filled out. Like, how do we combine that, and how did we get that into the platform where you're able to see it? So what I'm going to do first is I'm just going to demo some things. So just sit back and relax, and let me just share with you a little bit about how this works. And then, and this is the part where I get to fess up and admit that Corey and I made a few mistakes that we need to address as well. Okay, so can everybody see the survey 123 screen with the map? Perfect. Okay, so all of you, with yourself or your students, you went out with your smartphones and you used the Survey 123 app on your phone and you collected data. And when you went out with your smartphone with Survey 123, you collected two different types of data. So one thing you collected was location, right? So you actually used the cell phone GPS unit and you actually got the location. So that's why we've got points everywhere, right? And then the second part of the data you collected were the answers to all the questions that we had come up with last summer that you worked on. So, land cover type, is it close to a birdhouse, close to water, et cetera. And so if we go and we click on any one of these points that's here, we can actually see all of those results that you all worked on. So everything's in here, which is pretty cool. But you'll notice that there's nothing in here that says anything about the number of eggs and the number of adults, right? And that's because when you collected this data over the summer and the fall, we didn't have any of that data yet. So what ends up happening next is the entomology folks go through and then they count all the eggs and raise the adults, and then they start adding all of that data into their spreadsheets. And then basically in the GIS world, what we do is we basically take the data about the points and the data about the OVA traps, and we join those together so that if you're polydiver and you're week 35 and your trap number 2, we make sure that those two records match up between the OVA trap data and the location data. And that's really what we do. And then I take that data and then I push it up into ArcGIS Online. And so if you go and you look in my content section, there's that data right here, Megabytes 2020 mosquito data. And if we just click on this and look at it, so here's the description. So what Becky was talking about earlier with the metadata and that information that Joshua shared with you earlier about what all the columns mean. And one of the things that came up in my breakout room earlier was, hey, do we still have to do that filter out the negative 9999 stuff? So the good news is no. I got smart and built the database a little bit differently. So it now allows what's called a null value, which basically means instead of a 0, it's just completely empty. There's nothing in that cell. So with the 2020 data, you won't have to do that. And I'm going to go back because I like that plan so much better. And I'm going to change the 2019 data to use the same thing. And that way you won't ever have to worry about that part of the filtering ever again. And then once we get this data and we, well, let's see, let's just put this in a map real quick. And right now, I haven't changed the way the data is visualized at all. It's just points. That's all there is to it. So let's explore David's data for just a minute. So I'm going to zoom us in down here to the Saudi Daisy area, and we're just going to use his real quick as an example. And so when we take a look at that data, remember that you've got the location data and all the spreadsheet data basically, and all that's combined together. And you can see right down here that there are 576 points total in the whole thing. And that lines up with those 576 rows that you looked at when you were looking at the CODAP data. And once we know that and we know what's in that data, then we can start asking questions and starting to visualize the results that we've got. So one of the things we talked about earlier was the total eggs. So we can just look at that one if we want to start with. Total eggs. And basically what the GIS software does is it says, hey, Michael, I think that that's a number field. And if it's a number field, here's one way you can visualize it. And it changes the size of the point is proportional to the data value. So the more eggs, the bigger the point, the fewer eggs, the smaller the point. And we can look and we can see what appear, and actually let's just zoom in here. It looks like David's got a bunch of points that are stacked up and we're like, oh yeah, we've got multiple weeks worth of data here. So if you were thinking about filtering, one of the things you might want to filter then is based off of calendar week. And so we'll just do that. And now we can see we only have 1 week's worth of data. And then once we have that, we can say, okay, well, what if I don't want to look at total eggs? What if I want to look at adults? And I don't remember where the adults data is in here. Total, there it is, total adults. Okay. So maybe we look at that instead. Or if we don't want to look at it based off of the size of the symbol, let me change the base map to make this a little easier to see. Well, we could change it based on color, right? So typically the darker the color, the more of something, the lighter the color, less of something. And one of the other things we talked about earlier was when you were looking at CODAP and you were comparing two different variables to see what this relationship is like between them. So what if we looked at total adults, but then we compared that to what several of you all mentioned earlier, which was the elevation. So now we're color coding the symbol based off how many adults there are, and we're changing the size of the symbol to be the elevation. So it looks like most of David's points, let's see, were about the same elevation, more or less.
Yeah, they're good. Okay.
So in this case, David's data doesn't show us anything right now that's particularly interesting. Actually, hold on. Actually, we're going to change something real quick. Now I think this will visualize it a little bit differently. And so, okay, now we're just looking at David's data. We don't have everybody in the whole thing. So this might actually help it look a little bit. Nah, they're still about the same size. Okay, all right. Well, anyway, we can go and we can explore. And like we said, we celebrate failures, or sometimes we don't find the things that we're looking for. Okay, so we've got all this data now. And one of the things we recognize is remembering how to do all that filtering and what all the visualizations and things are. That's sometimes hard to remember all those steps. So we were thinking about different ways we could help with that part. So, and there was a question or a comment, so let me shut up for a second.
I lost the sound.
No, I was just saying that I like what you're doing. You're just seeing what happens, you know, just going in there, getting your hands dirty. I like that.
Yeah, just start clicking buttons.
Yeah, thanks. Well, so what we decided was maybe we need to do a better job of providing these things to you in a format that's ready to go. And so we're going to look at a couple of different things today. So we'll look at maps, we'll look at something called dashboards, and then we'll look at some story maps as well. So we put together this hub, and this hub actually contains all the things that we've built so far from a GIS standpoint. And I'm going to put this link in the chat in case you don't have it. And Paula, I'm going to send this to you via email as well. And if you want to follow along here, you can. And if you just want to watch them, that's also fine too, no big deal. But basically the way that this works is we've tried to organize the data and put it in ways that are easy to understand and visualize. And what's pretty cool is we're building this live off of all the data that you all collected. So these numbers that you see here, that's pulling out of that same layer you just looked at. So this data is live. So Corey and I are going to have to fix a few things in the data. And when we do that, these numbers are going to change a little bit, which I think is pretty cool. And then what we've done is we've organized this below into ways that I think kind of make sense. So for those of you that want to work with the just the charts and the graphs and you want to explore the data with CodeApp, this link takes you right to that project that Joshua shared with us earlier. I am going to click on the lacrosse maps one next. And so what we did was we've broken out the data a little bit. And so if you go to this page in the hub, this is data that has nothing to do with your OvaTrack data. And these maps actually represent, in this case, this is lacrosse cases in Tennessee, North Carolina by county, lacrosse cases by state, and then this is data from the CDC. And then you can click on any one of these and it should open up a live map that then you can explore. And if we go back to that main page, you can say, okay, well, really what I want to see is I want to see my 2020 data. So, okay, so let's click on our 2020 data. And here's some things that we've built. So we've got that same data layer you just saw where you're going to have to do all the work yourself. It's a great place to get started if you want to build custom maps for yourself or your students. So that same idea of choosing the way you want to visualize the data, choosing how you want to filter it or not filter it, that sort of thing. And then the data that Brian showed you as part of the geo inquiries in here, which is just the points. All right. And then this is the new thing that we're trying out this year to see if you like this better. So let me try this out. So we've got this dashboard that we built. And the way the dashboard is going to work is if we think about the story map as telling the story of the data. So we're providing a narrative that gives context to the data. The dashboard is really just a way to quickly look at the data without having to think about the narrative part of it. And so what we've done is we've tried to remove all that filtering and stuff that's kind of a pain to do, and instead provide you a bunch of resources all at a glance. And so if you wanted to narrow it down to just your school's data, instead of having to click on the layer name and click filter, you just go, okay, well, what if we just want Bearden Middle School data? All right, so let's click that. All right, and then when I do that, it filters everything that you see. So now we only see the Bearden Middle School data. We only see the Bearden Middle School data here, here, and on the map. And so we can see here's how many total adult mosquitoes Bearden had and how many eggs. Well, what if we want to just look at week 36? Well, we can do that as well. So now we filtered it by a school and we filtered it by a single week. So now we can look at that data. And I think I've got educator. Okay, and we've got two educators there. So what if we only want to look at Waldron's data, right? And then we can do that as well. So we've got all these different ways over here built in on the left that we can filter. And we're even trying a new one where we can filter out the data by elevation. So if you wanted to show like data above or below a certain value, basically we can do that as well. I'd like to think that this is a little bit easier to use and having to build those custom maps, and it helps you pretty quickly explore. But if you've got thoughts on that, I'd really like to hear them. And I'm going to give you all some time to explore these things on your own and give me some feedback. And then the other thing that we did was we've actually embedded Joshua's CODAP data in here as well. So you can actually interact with this directly within the dashboard. So you don't even have to leave the hub. So anyway, so we've tried to put all these resources in here for you. And then we've got the similar setup for the 2019 data is set up in here as well. So let me stop here and let's just ask questions and take a break. Who's got thoughts, comments, and questions about either where the data came from and how we put it together? Thoughts on, do you need any more examples for right now on visualizing the data? And then how do we use the hub and the dashboard and stuff?
Well, before we start, Michael, I'm sorry, I actually lost total sound while in the middle of you talking about data. I had to leave and come back. So is this basically the hub you shared in the chat? Okay.
Correct.
I'm good. I'm caught up with you.
I have a quick question about the hub. Like I pulled down my school and then you get another drop down where you can do by week. Okay, so if I choose 1 week and then it pulls up elevation, how do I get back to, oh, never mind. I think I found it.
I think you just change it to none in the drop down.
I didn't see the scroll bar on the side.
And you know what I just realized though, I don't think I actually have a link to get out to a full screen version of that. So I'm going to make myself a note right now to put that in here.
David, one of your questions that you had during one of the breaks was, what are the comments? If you look at the CODAP data in the dashboard and just kind of scroll down for 2020, the comments are there. You know, the paper was on the ground or whatnot. So it's there. The data are there.
Okay.
And so just one of the other things, our Lunch and Learn speaker today is a friend and colleague named Tim Kuhn. And Tim actually taught me how to build those dashboards. And Tim's going to tell you a little bit more about that process. So I know the title of this section is technically story mapping, but if this afternoon you want to talk about dashboards instead, we can do that as well. So don't think that we're limited to just one type or the other.
Are we going to take maybe 5 minutes to play on this and then just see what everybody finds?
Yeah, let's just do that.
While you're playing, if a couple of you do have time, so I've tried to send a couple of private chats to people regarding what they turned in. If you could just check the chat to see if you have a personal message, I'd appreciate it, and get back to me, before the end of the day.
Sweet.
I think I fixed mine for you. You can check it. If it's still not right, let me know.
You did, Dave. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Maybe we can all build a map with our 2020 data. Does that sound kind of like fun, Michael? We can share it if you want.
If you want to build a map, you can build a map. If you want to look for temporal elevation trends using the dashboard and explore, yeah, go wild, have fun. if you refresh the 2020 OvaTrap data page, if you want to, you can explore the dashboard in full screen. There's a link now underneath the dashboard, and I'll get the 2019 one fixed next.
Thank you.
All right, let's see. I got good questions showing up here in the chat. All right, so Paula wants to know, how do I see the eggs per cup? Okay, so the way I have the visualization set up is it does not show that right now. But if everyone thinks that that's probably the most useful thing, we can do that. I don't know if, let me show you one other thing here. Actually, let's talk about that. So Paula, great question. So let me go to the actual live view of this real quick. So I don't know if you noticed, but like this indicator down here that says the total number of eggs, if we click over, we can get the total number of adults, and then we can go back to the eggs and adults. We can do the same thing with the maps. We can actually stack multiple maps. So Paula would like to see total eggs. If we're going to look at total eggs, we should probably look at total adults as well. If there were other maps that you could look at, feel free to put those in the chat and let me know what those would be, and I'll build those out and add them.
So if I wanted to share the CODAP section that's on the base with my students, I would copy the link, I guess the link is the right word, URL on that page, and share that with them. And that's all they would be getting. They wouldn't be getting on the page.
Yeah, you can share anything related to CODAP completely independent of what's in the hub. We just thought it might be easier if we put all of these resources in one place, and that way you didn't have to remember, oh, here's the link to the story map, here's the one to the dashboard, here's the link to CODAP. We were kind of hoping it would be easier just to find it all in one spot.
Yeah, I was just making sure that when I shared it, it wasn't going to share the whole thing with the kids, just the one thing. Okay.
Michael, did you say you put a new drop down in, and if we refreshed it would be there?
Sorry, I can only focus on one thing at a time. So what I did was, if you click on the pages that have the dashboards, within the hub, there's now a link below it, and that link will take you to the full screen version. Because I realize sometimes it's a little harder to see all those drop downs and filters and things if you look at it just within the hub. And I just fixed the 2019 one as well. So let me show you what that should look like. So let me do a quick screen share. And so what you should see now is, if you're in the hub, and here I'm in the 2019 Maps and Data Hub, there's a link here at the bottom, and that should take you to the full screen version of the dashboard. And it should be a little easier to explore there. And I have not created those new maps, but I will create the maps, and I will put those in there. And basically where you see, well, actually, let me just show you here, because I built these a little bit differently, because we had different data between 2020 and 2019 initially. But here's your, what's called a serial chart. So it breaks it out by week. And then down here, it's total eggs. So I'll add a new one that'll have total adults. And like I said, if you all think of other things you want to have in here pre-built, ready for you to go, we can do that as well. I just haven't gotten there yet. And yes, Becky, we'll look at story map too.
Will there be a way to open the CODAP one at the bottom so that it's full screen? Because I can't scroll all the way to the left or the right.
Give me just 1 second, see if I can fix that for you real quick as well. Okay, so I think that was Crystal that was asking, right?
Yes.
Okay, so Crystal, I'm gonna do exactly what you just asked for, but let me show you another way you can get there. If you're on the front page of the hub and you click either of those two links, it'll take you to the full screen version. So let me just, I'll copy this link and then I'll do the same thing. So I'll go to the, I'll go to each of those separate pages. And I'll put a link below that to go to the full screen version.
Thanks.
Sure thing. Okay, Crystal, if you check the 2020 cohort page in the hub now, there should be a link below the code app, the embedded code app, that you can go to the full screen version from there now too. Yeah, so Nicole, I think you and Paula are asking for the same visualization. So I'll take care of that with eggs per cup and adults per cup. If you think of anything else, just drop me an email. It's actually relatively easy to add these once you get the sort of the framework of the skeleton built. So let's take a minute then and let's think about story maps, because that's the other way that we can tell people about our data that might make a more compelling reason why people should care. If you have any interest in thinking about data, Tim Harford, who's an economist that works, he has got a podcast and he's got several books. His latest book is called Data Detectives. It is excellent. And he talks in here specifically about if you want people to care about something, you have to embed it in a story. And he's talking specifically about your data. So let's look at a couple of examples. And I just pulled some of these up because David mentioned the ocean stuff earlier. So this is one that's about a particular section of the Marianas Trench that's the deepest spot on Earth. And he's telling the story of this location. And honestly, if you think about it, it's just a really deep spot, right? There shouldn't really be anything that interesting, I think, about this story. And then when you scroll down through here, though, he's kind of telling you all about it. So he gives you a little background on the plate tectonics. He's going to focus in on this particular spot. So, you know, if we're thinking about telling the story of lacrosse here in Tennessee, then maybe we start with a map that shows the entire US and it talks about the lacrosse cases across the US. And then maybe as we scroll through our story map, now we're going to focus in on East Tennessee. And then maybe if you're trying to tell the story for your school, so your immediate community, maybe there's one more zoom in now where you actually zoom into that bookmark that Brian taught you how to make earlier for just your school. And notice this is not interactive. This is just a picture. So, you know, some of your story maps can include things like static images, and not just, you know, you don't have to worry about just adding the interactive content to it. And he's just going through here and he's just telling this story. But when you get here, like my favorite part of this is like, he's trying to explain and give you context for how deep this thing actually is. And I'll kind of scroll down and get to this real quick, just so you can see this idea of putting things in context. So one of the other things that Tim Harford talks about is if we tell you that your school had 7,000 mosquito eggs, you kind of have to ask yourself, is that a lot? And so sometimes it might help to say, well, what happens if we compare the total number of eggs at all the different schools, right? Because that gives me some point of reference to compare to. Or you can use something that people could comprehend about the number like 7,000. So you might want to help try and put your data in context. And so like this graphic he's made where he shows the depth of Challenger Deep relative to the length of Manhattan and how far you'd have to go before you got there. And you just keep scrolling and you keep scrolling. I don't know, to me, that's kind of a cool way to think about this and try and put this in context that people can understand. So if you want to work with your students and if you're thinking about what Julie's been teaching us about communications, we could tell the narrative about the data in our community and why we should care. Another way you could think about doing this is you could almost build like an interactive, a different type of geo-inquiry. So one of the things that I've been building for my students is I think my lectures are pretty dry and boring, honestly, and I'm trying to come up with ways to make this stuff a little more interesting and engaging so that students don't just have to listen to me talk about this stuff. And so what I looked at was this concept of data classification, which should be really boring. And what I tried to do then was I tried to build a story map, but that tells the lesson of how to think about data classification. So you could almost think about building a geo-inquiry, but you actually build it in a story map so that instead of students going in and turning on this and turning off that and changing this visualization and changing that visualization, you're talking about it. And then as you scroll down and you look at it, okay, so maybe here's a picture of something. And then if I scroll down a little bit, here's actually the interactive map that I've included. And then maybe underneath this interactive map, you've actually got some questions you want your students to think about and ask. And maybe that's the link to something like a Google form or something like that where you're collecting responses. So I've put together a few of these. Again, just talking about the idea of like, how do I explain a concept without just using a super boring, really dry lecture. And then the other one I found that I thought was just really cool is this one made by NASA talking about urban heat island. And I'll just put this link in the main chat. This would be another way to think about using a story map in your class. And in this case, they're not necessarily making a narrative, which is how we normally think about story and story map. Instead, this is actually an entire lesson, but it's built and arranged as a story map. So here's the purpose. You can imagine like here's maybe where you put the science standards you're going to apply to, the learning outcomes, right? Here's that 5E framework that a lot of you are familiar with. And so it's got these different parts and pieces in here. All right, we can actually explore data and we'll actually bring in some live stuff here. All the way down here to the very end, which is this, all right, so this one's interactive so you can look at where the temperature is different based off the land cover. You know, And so every one of these tabs would be like a different step in your GeoInquiry. Could be another way to think about it. So I'm not going to tell you how you should build a story map. I just wanted to give you some different examples on different ways you could think about building one and what might be useful. All right. So Becky, I see your comment about species.
That was earlier when you were saying which ones do you want per cup.
Species.
Those are our response variables.
Yeah, that's great. And then Christy asked for, can you distinguish between a hub, a dashboard, and a story map? Okay, that's really good. Okay, so the story map is a type of application that we can use, and we can embed anything we want in that. So we can embed pictures, we can embed YouTube links, we can embed audio, we can embed our interactive maps. All right, so we can basically use that as a container to build an interactive website that we can use then to like I said, either tell a story probably, or guide someone through some process. All right, the dashboard, you know, the dashboard doesn't really tell a story. It's really just a snapshot of data, and you can use it to very quickly kind of get an overview of whatever data set you're looking at. So, you know, for the last year, we've been looking at those COVID-19 dashboards. So again, it's not telling the story. There's no narrative component to that to talk about it, but it is giving us a snapshot that we can use to know what's going on with this data set. And then a hub is basically like a backpack, and we take the story maps, we take the geo inquiries, we take the dashboards, and we can dump all that in a hub, and hopefully it's in a way that it keeps it organized. That way you can find it. So the hub is kind of the big container, and then we can tell stories and guide people using story maps, or we can give people sort of an operations view of our data using the dashboard.
So a hub could host all kinds of dashboards and story maps all in one place, correct?
Correct. So let's say hypothetically there was a group of teachers and they were going to all make lesson plans, but some were going to make geo inquiries, and then some were going to make story maps, and some were going to make CODAP exercises. Well, we could actually take all of those different parts and pieces you create with your students, and we can put those in the hub. So instead of having to email Christy and ask for Christy's really cool story map, instead you just go to the hub and Christy's story map will be there. And if you want Julie's really cool CODAP visualization she set up, we can have that link there as well. So it kind of, like I said, becomes a container where you can keep all these different parts and pieces. We're not asking you to build one of these. We did that for you. We just want you to help us fill it with really cool, creative things that we can share with your fellow Megabytes people, and then the next cohorts that come through.
Yeah, so think of it as the hub will be connected to our Megabytes website, and you'll be able to go from there. We'll be able to go from our website to the hub with your class, and then there'll be things that you can do within the hub. And then there'll be other things that kind of are outside of that as well. That'll be in the lesson plan section too. Does that make sense? Okay. Let's see a thumbs up. Great.
And so, Becky, that was going to be it for me, other than just giving folks a chance to think about things, hit buttons and explore and see what looks like it could be a good fit for them and kind of their teaching style and thinking about what their students need.
All right, so we're running a little bit early, which is great in general. Why don't you all play on that? Oh, the other thing I wanted to mention was the dashboard could be a great place to get students to look at data on itself and ask questions, you know, because it's just data, it's raw data, and you can have them just brainstorm. What do you think? What does it look like? Are numbers going up? Are they going down? Why was week 37 the way week 37 was, right? Why was that our peak and then mosquito started to go down? I think that part's kind of nice. And then, yeah, so we are a little bit early. I think Tim,
Hey, Becky?
yes.
Can I talk a little bit about the map links that were turned in?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So I got a bunch of them in. I think I've got 13 map links in, and you all did great. You all shared publicly. You all had bookmarks except for one, and I sent a note to that person about a bookmark. But I will give you, as far as my assessment goes, you all get an A. but but I do want to challenge you, and this does not require a new link to be sent at all. I want to challenge you to rename your maps without the word copy in it. If you could rename your map with either your school name at the end or the beginning, or your name at the end or the beginning, if you could rename your maps, that would be really awesome. Some of you did. Some of you left the word, a lot of you left the word copy in there, and I would really love to get rid of that in there. That would get you an A+, for those looking for bonus points. But so I want to thank you for that. I think I have been chatting and emailing with a couple of people, but and if I have, and let you know that I got you like Dave and a couple of other people, they put in their bookmarks and they resend a link. But there's one person I would love to get to do a bookmark, and if they want to email me for a little extra help, that would be fine. But it is public, and I appreciate all your hard work. And just say, hey, great job. And if you want to learn how to do that on your own, after lunch, I can help you. Thank you, Becky, for letting me take a few minutes there.
I have a quick question. Because we shared it with you, will it automatically give you the update when we change our name, or do we have to reshare it with you?
You do not have to reshare it.
Okay, mine's changed.
Yeah, you do not have to reshare the link. You're just changing the title of it. The link is still the same.
Okay.
Thank you.
Oh, you've got to check out the one that Corey just shared in the chat. This is awesome.
Seriously, bonus points if anybody makes something like this.
I know that the person that made this, he did not know anything about doing this before he started. This was my advisor from my last school.
Ah. Oh, and look, Corey's an author on it too. Awesome.
Yeah, I really want to see video of the inside of your ova traps and look around and see what's in there. That's too cool. And then even you could think about even maybe taking pictures when you take your pictures of your ova trap locations, right? So those pictures could be embedded in here too. And you could talk about, we picked this one because it was near this ditch, and we picked this one because it was near the tree line. And you could see David having his students have a diagram of a tree, and they're going to say, we put some traps here near ground level, and then we put some up here, higher up 10 or 12 feet or whatever it ended up being. So you could come up with all sorts of cool, creative things you could do to tell the story about your project and what you were collecting.
All right, so we do have a little bit of time before Tim will actually be signing on. I think we told him around noon 30. Is that right, Michael? Yeah, so I guess let's take this time as a stretch break, get your lunch together, right?